Hello, and welcome to a new episode of NSPE's Committee Corner. I'm your host, Margaret Edwards, and this week we are joined by NSPE President Tricia Hatley for a conversation on autonomous vehicles and safety. We're going to be looking through the lens of a House Committee on Energy and Commerce, one of their subcommittee hearings on automobile technologies. And the reason that we're looking through this committee is the Energy and Commerce Committee has actually been the leading committee on this issue in past Congresses. So the hearing, it occurred last month and it was titled Promises and Perils, the Potential of Automobile Technologies. And it was hosted by the Subcommittee on Consumer Protection and Commerce. And the chair of that subcommittee is Jan Schakowsky of Illinois, and the ranking member is Gus Bilirakis of Florida. So for this hearing, they talked about a broad range of automobile technologies, from automated driver assist technologies to autonomous vehicles, which is really our focus for today, as well as, drunk driving prevention tech that's kind of really in the works, but, still something that they wanted to address, and all really, focusing in on safety issues and, making cars a lot safer. Yes, all those technologies were addressed, but really the focus did really hone in on autonomous vehicles throughout the hearing, from the opening statements of the members of Congress to the statements of the panelists, as well as, really that being the focus of the questions and answers that were asked of the panelists. The panelists for this hearing were Jason Levine, who's the executive director at the Center for Auto Safety, Greg Reagan, who's the president for Transportation, the Trades Department at the AFL-CIO, and Dr. Raj Kumar, who is a professor in the Department of Electrical and Computer Engineering at my alma mater, Carnegie Mellon University. And so just some kind of takeaways from the hearing, it really sounds like, safety and competition on the global stage are really motivating factors behind the interest in autonomous vehicles in Congress right now. There is no real big autonomous vehicle legislation yet this Congress, which is something that we're certainly going to be paying attention to. But, there have been smaller related bills, but nothing quite to the level of either the Self-Drive Act or the AV Start Act, which are both from the 115th Congress. That goes back to 2017 and 2018. So we haven't really seen any real movement on the legislative front on this issue really since then. And so, of course, NSPE really does seek to play an active role in conversations around autonomous vehicles. Of course, we have our 2018 Autonomous Vehicle Policy Guide that puts forth 12 different recommendations in areas such as risk assessment, ethics compliance disclosure, safety features, vehicle-to-vehicle connectivity, and going on down the list. And you can find the guide on the NSPE website if you have any interest in looking at that. We've also drafted and submitted replies to relevant federal requests for comment. Our most recent is from January 2021, in which we responded to NHTSA, which is the National Highway Transportation Safety Administration. And that's regarding a safety framework for autonomous vehicles. And we also do have various advocacy efforts around legislation. We provided feedback during the staff draft process during the 116th Congress, as well as work relating to the 2017 House and Senate AV bills. So we've been active on this issue. We plan to remain an active part of this conversation. So that brings us to our guest for this episode, NSPE President Tricia Hatley. F.NSPE. Trish, we're so excited to have you here to kind of have a conversation about NSPE, autonomous vehicles, and safety. So let's just kind of dive right in. So I guess what is it about autonomous vehicles that really, interests you, fascinates you, excites you, or concerns you so much to the point of wanting to talk about it with us today?
Sure. Well, I mean, as an engineer, the development of this emerging technology is fascinating to me, kind of watching it develop, how quickly it's being developed and implemented into our vehicles. And there's kind of two aspects of the use of the technology that I'm most excited about. And one is the improvements to driver safety. I spend a lot of time on the road as a part of my job, going to visit clients and going between offices. And so driver safety is personally very important to me. So that aspect of it is interesting to me. And then the other side of it is the mobility options that it has the potential to create for those with disabilities who are unable to drive unassisted. And so I think that's kind of a fascinating component of this, especially, as our country ages and we deal with all of those issues.
Yeah, I totally agree. I mean, those are definitely factors about autonomous vehicles that Congress is very much paying attention to, and I think that's right on the money. So as particularly as a transportation engineer, I guess where does your interest in AV stem from? Kind of maybe different than what fascinates you or excites you about this technology.
Right. So in my professional world here, I'm a roadway design engineer, designing municipal roadways and highways. I also have worked on planning projects, transportation and urban planning projects. So there's so many aspects of this that are interesting as we kind of think about the future, from a planning side. Will we need the big parking lots and kind of all of the places to store our cars? Maybe not, depending on how the technology is implemented. And so that will affect how we plan our communities in the future potentially. And then, like, from a roadway design side, I'm curious how it's going to affect how we design roadways, how we stripe and sign our roadways, and the kind of technology that's built into the roadway systems themselves. Here in Oklahoma, where I live, our Turnpike Authority is investing millions of dollars in the implementation of fiber optics all along their corridors, and they're using that technology to provide messaging to drivers to help improve their safety. But that same technology will be used potentially for vehicles to communicate with the drivers in the future. So there's all kinds of implications to us as designers and to the owners and operators of these systems, and the funding that may be required, right, to come up with this advanced technology and this increased level of maintenance that may be required to maintain those stripes so that the cars can see them, and respond. I mean, there's just a lot of implications to our industry, and that certainly all of us in the transportation field are paying close attention to.
Yeah, exactly. So I think, so my next question is, like, as autonomous vehicles are being developed, the technology is being refined, or even as they begin to be deployed on public roads in a larger capacity, whether it's, more your classic single occupancy vehicles or just the technology on different types of vehicles, what are considerations that you want to be sure are being made, or if there are any considerations specific to safety that you really think need to be at the forefront of implementing this technology?
Right. Well, I talked about the driver safety aspect of it. And so personally, that's important to me. And I think the car manufacturers and people developing the technology are certainly paying close attention to that. But as a professional engineer and as a leader in NSPE, I'm also interested in how these cars interact with the environment and pedestrians, other drivers on the roadway, and just the public safety overall. And I think that's something that maybe the developers of the technology maybe don't spend enough time on, and it's something that our those in the regulatory area, the public officials really need to focus their efforts on. So that's, that's something that concerns me, that I'd like to see some special attention paid to.
Yeah, exactly. And I think, definitely that's been something that, on the staff level at NSPE, as we're engaging through our public comments that we're making and responding to requests for comments, really do hone in on, especially, in some of earlier here in my time at NSP, really focusing in on that, what does that public interaction piece look like? How would me as a pedestrian, how will I know that the vehicle is going to stop and let me cross the street? And yeah, I think that's something that, definitely needs to be considered and thought about as these are, being pushed out in a higher volume.
Right. Scary, isn't it, to think about what could happen? And we've seen lots of incidences, of things not going exactly right.
Yeah, I think especially, everybody goes back to the accident that happened in Arizona with the Uber self-driving vehicle, and how that, I think, is a wake-up call for manufacturers to make sure that they're able to identify, pedestrians or somebody who's walking with a bike or a cyclist, and even just an additional, I think, wake up call to the public too, that, okay, yes, these are expected to improve safety. Maybe we're not there yet. And so let's actually keep the manufacturers honest and, really keeping them, on top of the safety factor. So yeah, I agree with that. So, here in the committee corner, we look at, through legislation and, the more legislative committee piece of it. So what is one thing, you just as a member of the public, or you as a professional engineer, would really like to see within a piece of autonomous vehicle legislation? If it could be something, related to safety standards or involvement of professional engineers, I guess, what is like one thing that you'd want to see within that?
I think if you look at the materials that NSPE has produced, I really think the risk assessment component is probably the most important for us to engage in. I know that the vehicle manufacturers, those that are developing the technology, I'm sure they're consulting their attorneys and, and talking with the insurance community about liability issues and those kinds of things. But I think it'd be really important to have a professional engineer at the table during those discussions around the risk, and to bring that aspect of, protection of public health, safety, and welfare. And without a professional engineer at the table, I'm not comfortable or convinced that part of the conversation is being considered in that risk assessment. And so I think NSPE has done a nice job lining out a way to do that. And there's examples of how it's been done with other technology in the transportation area. And so I think if our policymakers could just take a look at that and include that as we move forward, that solid risk assessment, and ideally with a professional engineer involved in that conversation, that would be very helpful.
Yeah, I think that's a great answer. And I think that, really provides a pivot to my next question for you. If, we want professional engineers to be involved, like what expertise can professional engineers, bring to the table in the conversation around autonomous vehicles? And I guess, how can we, make the profession's views known further, beyond, what we've at NSP have done already in the past, and what we plan to continue to do, but what maybe more can we be doing?
Right. Well, I think, our staff, you guys have done a great job engaging, with our legislators and policymakers. But I think each of us as professional engineers need to get involved. And I was just at a legislative breakfast this morning in my hometown, with all of our representatives and senators, up on the stage. And it just reminded me how much they depend on people like us on these, really technical and, detail oriented issues. And they've got to be experts in everything, and that's just not possible, right? And so they really need us to help them. And, and I think maybe sometimes engineers are afraid to talk about issues like this. Like I am not a software development expert. I know nothing about the manufacture of cars. But as a transportation engineer, I know how it's going to affect the work that I do. And I have concerns as a professional engineer. And so just sitting down and having a conversation with my legislators about this issue, helping them to understand, because I think a lot of them probably assume that we are at the table and that we are, the appropriate people are involved, and they just don't know what they don't know, you know? And so, if we can talk, if each of us can talk to our representatives and senators at the state and the federal level and kind of make them aware of this issue, let them know that we're a resource out there to help them and answer their questions, connect them, share the resources that NSPE has put together, all of those things. It's from what I've experienced in talking with my legislators, they're hungry to have that kind of resource available to them and to really understand what our concerns are. So, and they're always open to that conversation. So, and it's a fun conversation to have. It's much more fun than talking about some of the things we have to go talk about, right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So my final question, you really touched upon in your last answer, just, encouraging, having those conversations with legislators or their staff. So like, do you have any parting thoughts, about advocacy, getting involved in advocacy, particularly here at NSPE?
Yeah, no, advocacy and kind of grassroots efforts has been probably the most fun part of what I've learned through NSPE. I had, before getting involved at the state and national level, I had never talked to one of my legislators before. I knew what I learned in school, right, about civics and the process, but had never engaged and didn't really understand the value of engaging and really that's really what drives our whole system, is that engagement. And so if you don't engage, it's not going to work properly. So anyway, I had the opportunity to participate in PE Day at the Hill and things like that at the state level, and then the advocacy center that your team has put together and for us as NSPE members has so many great tools that just makes it super easy. You've got the resources to use when you're the talking points, how to pick up the phone, who to call, all that kind of stuff. It's not that hard once you just do it, and it's a lot of fun to have those conversations. Like I said, everybody is, whether you're talking to a staff person or a legislator, they're so respectful, and like I said, they want our technical information, so they're super nice and open to the conversation. So I found it super easy and really appreciated the help and the resources that you all have provided, both they're nationally and at the state level and getting involved. I imagine, after my term as president and all that, I'll still be engaged, but hopefully even more so get an opportunity to work more closely with our legislators, as I progress in my career. Like I said, I just think it's important for us as a profession, and it's important for us as citizens of the U.S. Like this is how our government works.
Yeah, exactly. Thank you. Yeah, I really, appreciate hearing that, particularly how easy it is to be involved, even if it's just, writing a letter, and maybe you'll get to the point where you want to make a phone call or actually meet with them in person. Yeah, I really, really appreciate that, as well as your kind words about, the Advocacy Center and, the work that we do. So with that, I think that concludes, this week's episode of Committee Corner. So please do tune in next week. You can find us in the NSPE Advocacy Center or on the NSPE YouTube page. And Tricia, thank you so much for joining us this week. And I hope you have a great rest of your day.
Thank you.
Thanks.